The content provided in this video is strictly for educational and informational purposes only and does not constitute professional financial, legal, tax, or academic advisory services. The landscape of higher education funding, student loans, and scholarship availability is highly complex and subject to continuous changes in federal legislation, state regulations, and individual institutional policies. All data, historical trends, and case studies discussed in this masterclass reflect publicly available information and specific individual scenarios that may not be universally applicable. We are not licensed financial advisors or certified educational planners. Any strategies regarding college tuition, student debt management, or financial aid applications carry inherent risks and require careful consideration of your unique personal and financial circumstances. Viewers are strongly advised to conduct their own exhaustive due diligence, independently verify all application deadlines and eligibility requirements directly with the granting organizations, and consult with independent, qualified financial professionals before making any legally binding commitments, signing student loan agreements, or finalizing college enrollment decisions. Relying on the information presented in this video is done entirely at your own discretion and risk. Right now, as you watch this, an estimated $100 million in legitimate scholarship funds are sitting completely untouched, destined to be rolled over or returned to corporate treasuries simply because no one applied for them. Meanwhile, the total national student loan debt has ballooned to astronomical levels, crippling an entire generation's ability to purchase homes, start businesses, or achieve financial independence. We are currently standing in the year 2026, and the cost of attendance at a standard four-year private university has shattered previous ceilings, with some Tier 1 institutions now demanding over $90,000 for a single academic year. You have been sold a deeply flawed narrative about how to pay for higher education. You have been told that applying for scholarships is a lottery, a game of chance reserved solely for high school valedictorians, elite athletes, or students facing extreme financial hardship. This is a statistical falsehood propagated by an outdated educational advisory system. The reality of college funding today is far more mechanical, highly strategic, and completely detached from the superficial advice you have likely received. Consider the systemic failure of the traditional high school advisory model. The national average ratio of students to guidance counselors sits at a staggering 400 to 1. When you break down the administrative burdens, disciplinary interventions, and standardized testing logistics those counselors must manage, the mathematics reveal a deeply troubling reality. Your high school counselor, regardless of their personal dedication or professional competence, has an estimated 22 minutes per academic year to dedicate to your specific collegiate future. 22 minutes to solve a $250,000 financial puzzle. It is an impossible task, and it leaves millions of capable students entirely unequipped to navigate a financial aid ecosystem that has become increasingly labyrinthine. Furthermore, the structural fallout from the chaotic restructuring of the free application for federal student aid over the past few years has fundamentally permanently altered how universities distribute their institutional wealth. The algorithms used to determine the student aid index have shifted, completely redefining who qualifies for financial support. Let us examine a typical case study that reflects broader historical trends in the current economic climate. Consider a middle-class family residing in the American Midwest, earning a combined household income of $110,000 annually. Under the legacy financial aid models, this family might have anticipated a modest but meaningful package of need-based grants. Today, they fall directly into what financial planners call the middle-class donut hole. They are mathematically deemed too wealthy to qualify for substantial federal or state need-based grants, yet they are practically entirely incapable of writing a check for $60,000 a year out of pocket without liquidating their retirement accounts or taking on predatory secondary loans. This student, despite possessing a strong academic profile and significant extracurricular leadership, is staring down the barrel of six-figure debt before they even declare a major. This is the exact trajectory the traditional advice puts you on. You are instructed to write generic essays, mass apply through aggregated scholarship search engines that sell your data to third-party marketers, and hope that your application is miraculously selected from a pool of 50,000 identical candidates. This masterclass is designed to systematically dismantle that antiquated approach and replace it with a rigorous, data-driven framework. The problem we are solving for you today is the critical knowledge gap between how you think universities award money and how institutional finance offices actually operate. Colleges are not benevolent charities. They are highly sophisticated businesses managing multi-billion-dollar endowments and complex enrollment targets. Private colleges, in particular, operate their financial aid models exactly like the pricing algorithms of major commercial airlines. If you were to walk down the aisle of a commercial flight, you would find that no two passengers sitting next to each other paid the exact same price for their ticket. The person in seat 12A might have paid full fare, while the person in 12B utilized strategic loyalty points, and the person in 12C booked during a highly specific promotional window. Higher education operates on the exact same principle, utilizing what is known internally as the institutional discount rate. We are going to explore how you can leverage this discount rate to your absolute advantage. You will learn how to identify the specific institutional priorities of the colleges you are targeting. Universities offer massive, unadvertised financial incentives to students who fulfill demographic, geographic, or academic deficits within their incoming freshman class. If a prestigious engineering program in the Northeast has recognized a historical trend of under-enrollment from applicants in the Pacific Northwest, a student from Oregon applying to that specific program suddenly possesses tremendous leverage. This guide will provide you with the exact strategies to research and map these institutional deficits. We will transition away from the highly competitive, low-yield national scholarships, the ones advertised on massive billboards and television commercials, and pivot your focus entirely toward high-yield, hyperlocal, and hyper-specific institutional endowments. By the end of this deep dive, you will possess a comprehensive understanding of how to audit your own digital and academic footprint to align perfectly with the philanthropic goals of private foundations. You will understand the critical difference between direct-to-student disbursements and institutional offsets. You will learn how to approach regional businesses, local Rotary clubs, and professional associations with a compelling value proposition that positions your education as an investment in the local community, rather than a mere request for charity. We will cover the specific documentation you need to prepare, the strategic timelines that dictate when funds are actually allocated, and the precise language required to negotiate a financial aid award letter effectively once it has been issued. You are going to stop treating the scholarship search as a desperate, last-minute gamble during the spring of your senior year, and you will begin executing it as a targeted, multi-year strategic acquisition campaign. The rules of financing higher education have been completely rewritten for 2026, and it is time you learned exactly how to play the game. The mathematical reality of the modern scholarship landscape dictates that your time is the most easily squandered resource in this entire process. Most families begin their funding journey by creating profiles on massive national scholarship databases. They input their demographic data, GPA, and intended majors, and are instantly bombarded with thousands of supposedly matching opportunities. What you are actually experiencing is a highly sophisticated data harvesting operation. Many of these platforms operate fundamentally as lead generation engines for private student loan companies and third-party marketers. When you apply for a high-visibility, no-essay national scholarship offering $10,000, you are entering a digital lottery alongside 500,000 other hopeful applicants. The historical trends show that the return on investment for the hours spent crafting essays for these national sweepstakes is statistically abysmal. You are fighting a war of attrition against an algorithm. To succeed in 2026, you must completely abandon the national arena and pivot your focus toward achieving a localized monopoly. We call this the geographic containment strategy. Every single county in the United States has a network of philanthropic organizations, civic clubs, and private local businesses that allocate portions of their annual budgets to educational endowments. I am talking about the local Rotary Club, the regional chapter of the American Water Works Association, the County Cattlemen Association, or the family-owned manufacturing firm down the street. These organizations do not have the marketing budgets to advertise on national television or sponsor major search engines. Their application pools are consequently microscopic. Instead of competing against 500,000 students from all 50 states, you are competing against maybe 12 students from your specific zip code. Let us look at a case study that perfectly illustrates the power of this localized approach. Consider a student named Marcus, graduating from a public high school in suburban Georgia in this current year of 2026. Marcus had a respectable 3.6 grade point average, but lacked the elite standardized test scores required for massive merit-based institutional full rides. Instead of wasting his senior fall applying to national corporate scholarships, Marcus executed a systematic audit of his immediate 60-mile radius. He identified a local credit union offering $2,000 to students pursuing business, a regional agricultural cooperative offering $1,500, and a municipal historical society offering $500 for an essay about local industry. By treating this search like a localized targeted acquisition campaign, Marcus secured 8 separate micro-scholarships. None of them were glamorous. None of them exceeded $3,000 individually, but strategically stacked together, they generated over $14,000 in highly predictable low-competition funding for his freshman year. The secret to executing Marcus's strategy lies in understanding how to follow the paper trail of philanthropic money. This is where we move beyond basic Google searches and step into professional financial research. Every tax-exempt nonprofit organization, private foundation, and charitable trust in the United States is required by law to file an annual disclosure document with the Internal Revenue Service, known as a Form 990. These documents are entirely public records, accessible through databases like the ProPublica Nonprofit Explorer or the IRS website itself. If you want to know if a local foundation actually awards the money they advertise, or if you want to discover hidden endowments that have no active website, you pull their Form 990. By navigating to Schedule 1 of this document, you can view the exact granular details of their grant allocations. You can see the precise dollar amounts they awarded last year, and often the names and educational institutions of the specific students who received the funds. This completely eliminates the guesswork. You are no longer applying blindly. You are applying to organizations with a documented, legally verified history of localized payout. Imagine if you could look at the financial blueprint of every local business and see exactly what they value before you ever sit down to write your application essay. By analyzing these public tax records, you can tailor your narrative to align perfectly with the historical funding patterns of the board of directors. If the local community foundation has a 10-year track record of awarding their largest scholarships to students entering the skilled trades or nursing, and you are entering a healthcare management program, you structure your entire application to highlight the intersection of those precise local workforce deficits. You position yourself not as a student asking for a handout, but as a high-yield investment who will eventually return to that specific county to solve a critical local economic problem. However, securing this outside funding introduces one of the most dangerous and least understood mechanisms in higher education finance. It is a systemic trap known as award displacement, and if you do not know how to navigate it, every single dollar you earn from local scholarships could be completely neutralized. Institutional financial aid offices operate under strict federal and institutional guidelines regarding a student's demonstrated financial need. Imagine if you have a demonstrated financial need of $20,000 and your university generously offers you a $20,000 institutional grant. You are thrilled. Then you hustle locally and win $5,000 from a regional civic organization. You dutifully report this outside scholarship to your university's financial aid office, expecting your total aid to jump to $25,000. Instead, the university recalculates your package. Because your demonstrated need cannot legally be exceeded, the university simply reduces their own institutional grant by $5,000. Your net financial gain for winning that outside scholarship is exactly zero. You have essentially done the hard work of fundraising to subsidize the university's operating budget, not your own education. Understanding the mechanics of award displacement is the dividing line between amateur applicants and sophisticated financial strategists. While a handful of states have implemented legislation in recent years to ban or restrict this practice at public universities, private institutions across the country still heavily utilize displacement to manage their discount rates and balance their institutional budgets. You must investigate the outside scholarship policy of every single institution on your target list before you ever enroll. Some progressive institutions will allow outside scholarships to first replace your mandated student loans or work-study expectations before touching your free grant money. Others have rigid dollar-for-dollar reduction policies that penalize your independent hustle. If you find yourself facing an award letter that threatens to cannibalize your hard-earned local scholarships through displacement, you are not powerless. There is a highly specific protocol for appealing these reductions. There is a precise method for instructing private local foundations on exactly how and when to disburse their checks to legally bypass these institutional reduction triggers. You have to know the exact federal terminology to use when speaking to a financial aid officer, and you have to know how to leverage competing offers to force the university to absorb the displacement themselves. The exact scripts, the federal loopholes, and the step-by-step negotiation tactics to protect every single dollar of your outside funding are exactly what we are going to expose next. The moment you receive that notification letter from a local foundation congratulating you on winning a community scholarship, your immediate instinct is likely to endorse the check and mail it directly to your university bursar office. Do not do this. This reflex is the exact mechanism by which thousands of capable students inadvertently trigger their own financial aid reduction. Before a single dollar changes hands, you must execute a calculated defense of your capital. To successfully navigate the threat of award displacement, you must first master the specific terminology utilized by federal regulators and institutional compliance officers. The mathematical foundation of all financial aid in the year 2026 is built upon two distinct figures: your cost of attendance and your student aid index. The cost of attendance is the university's official estimate of what 1 year of enrollment will cost, including tuition, standard room and board, basic textbooks, and a modest allowance for personal expenses. Your student aid index is the federally calculated metric that determines your family's financial strength. When you subtract your student aid index from the cost of attendance, the resulting number is your official demonstrated financial need. Award displacement occurs when a university meets 100% of your demonstrated financial need through their own institutional grants, and then you bring in an outside scholarship. Because federal regulations prevent a student from receiving financial aid that exceeds their total cost of attendance, the university is legally required to adjust your package. However, they choose to reduce their free grant money rather than reducing your expected out-of-pocket contribution. The primary strategy to combat this institutional clawback is to strategically engineer an expansion of your official cost of attendance. Every financial aid office possesses the discretionary authority to adjust your individual cost of attendance through a federally recognized process known as a professional judgment review. By increasing your official cost of attendance, you create a larger mathematical gap of unmet need, providing a safe harbor where your outside scholarship funds can be applied without triggering a reduction in your institutional grants. Consider a highly detailed case study to illustrate this precise mechanism. Imagine if a student named David from Austin, Texas, is preparing to enter a private university in the fall of 2026. David has a total cost of attendance of $75,000 and a student aid index of $20,000, leaving him with a demonstrated financial need of $55,000. The university generously offers him a $55,000 institutional grant. David then wins a highly competitive $5,000 regional engineering scholarship. If David simply hands that check to the university, his institutional grant will be immediately slashed to $50,000. Instead, David initiates a professional judgment appeal to expand his cost of attendance. He does not simply ask for more money. He provides a meticulous, itemized portfolio of legitimate educational expenses that exceed the university's standard, generic budget allowances. David documents the necessity of a high-performance, $3,000 laptop specifically required by the university's mechanical engineering department to run advanced computer-aided design software. He provides official price quotes for specialized laboratory safety equipment and required industry certification exams that are not covered in the base tuition. Furthermore, because David is traveling from Texas to a university in the Northeast, he submits historical pricing data for 3 round-trip commercial flights for mandatory campus closures during Thanksgiving, winter break, and spring recess, proving that the standard $500 travel allowance in the official cost of attendance is drastically insufficient. By submitting this comprehensive documentation, David successfully petitions the financial aid office to increase his individual cost of attendance from $75,000 to $80,000. He has legally engineered $5,000 of newly recognized unmet need. When his regional engineering scholarship check is subsequently processed, it fills that exact newly created gap. His original $55,000 institutional grant remains entirely untouched, and he has successfully protected every single dollar of his outside funding. If you find yourself in a scenario where expanding the cost of attendance is mathematically impossible, or if the financial aid office rigidly denies your professional judgment appeal, you must pivot to your secondary line of defense, negotiating the allocation order of your financial aid package. You must formally request that your outside scholarship be applied to the least desirable components of your aid package first. Your exact communication with the financial aid director should state that you respectfully request all outside funding be utilized to first replace your federally subsidized student loan offers, followed by your institutional work-study expectations, before any reductions are applied to your institutional gift aid. You are essentially telling the university that you refuse to let your hard-won local scholarship subsidize their operating budget, while you are simultaneously being asked to take on federal debt or work 20 hours a week in the campus cafeteria. Many universities will concede to this specific request if it is articulated professionally and persistently, as it still keeps them within federal compliance while acknowledging your independent effort. There is a third, highly advanced tactic utilized by strategic educational planners to bypass award displacement entirely, and it involves directly negotiating with the private foundations awarding the local scholarships. Historical trends in higher education finance reveal a pervasive and highly deceptive institutional practice known as front-loading. Front-loading is the strategy where a university offers an incredibly generous, heavily discounted financial aid package during a student's freshman year to aggressively secure their enrollment. However, once the student is locked into the institution, integrated into the campus culture, and faces the massive logistical friction of transferring, the university systematically reduces that institutional grant money for the sophomore, junior, and senior years. The historical data for 2026 shows this practice is accelerating, leaving upperclassmen scrambling to cover sudden, unexpected tuition gaps. To counteract this, you can proactively approach the local foundation that awarded you the scholarship and request a deferred disbursement. Imagine if you sat down with the board of directors of the local manufacturing firm that just awarded you $3,000. You present them with your freshman year award letter, demonstrating that due to the university's displacement policy, their generous philanthropic contribution will not actually benefit you this year, but will instead simply vanish into the university's general fund. You then formally request that they hold the funds in their trust and disperse the scholarship during the fall semester of your sophomore or junior year, precisely when historical trends indicate your institutional grants will decrease and a genuine gap of unmet need will emerge. The overwhelming majority of local community foundations are entirely run by pragmatic local business owners. When you explain that you are attempting to maximize the actual purchasing power of their charitable donation and protect their money from institutional absorption, they are almost universally highly receptive to restructuring the payout timeline. You have not only saved your funding, but you have also demonstrated a level of mature financial stewardship that often results in those same foundations offering you paid internships or additional funding in subsequent years. You now possess the architectural framework to extract money from your local geographic radius, and the exact federal mechanisms required to protect that capital from institutional clawbacks. You have neutralized the threat of displacement and maximized your initial leverage. However, the strategies discussed thus far only address external funding sources. The most significant pools of unrestricted capital do not reside in the community, nor do they reside in the central admissions office. They are hidden deep within the bureaucratic structure of the university itself, completely insulated from the standard financial aid application process. There are massive, specialized endowments completely controlled by individual academic department chairs, legacy alumni networks, and hyper-niche academic honors programs that most students never even realize exist until after they have already graduated. If you want to access the six-figure institutional money, you must bypass the admissions office entirely and learn how to infiltrate the specific academic departments. The fundamental misconception that cripples most families is viewing a university as a single, monolithic financial entity. When you submit your free application for federal student aid and your admissions application, you are interacting strictly with the central bureaucracy. This central office operates on rigid algorithms, demographic quotas, and broad institutional discount rates. But a university is not a single bank. It is a loose confederation of independent academic fiefdoms, and each of these fiefdoms, meaning the specific academic departments, controls its own private treasury. This money exists entirely outside the jurisdiction of the Central Financial Aid Office. To understand why this parallel economy exists, you must understand the psychology of wealthy alumni donors. When a highly successful civil engineer who graduated 30 years ago decides to donate $5 million to their alma mater, they rarely write a blank check to the university's general fund. They legally restrict that capital. They draft binding endowment agreements stipulating that the yield from their donation must be used exclusively to recruit top-tier talent into the civil engineering department. The Central Financial Aid officers cannot touch those restricted funds to balance their spreadsheets. They cannot use that money to fund a sociology major or build a new athletic facility. The sole authority to disperse that capital rests with the department chair or a highly specialized faculty committee within that specific academic wing. These faculty members are not financial aid professionals. They are professors, researchers, and academics. Their primary motivation is not balancing the university budget, but rather elevating the prestige of their own department, increasing their graduation rates, and securing students who will actively contribute to their ongoing research projects. Because this money is heavily siloed and rarely advertised on the main university financial aid website, the applicant pool for these departmental scholarships is staggeringly small. Most incoming freshmen simply do not know this money exists until their sophomore or junior year, long after the initial funds have been quietly distributed to the few students who knew exactly who to ask. Let us examine a case study that highlights the potential outcomes of bypassing the central admissions office. Consider a student named Jessica, applying to a major state university in Ohio for the fall semester of 2026. Jessica intends to major in materials science, a highly specialized field. Her central financial aid package arrives, and it is entirely underwhelming, consisting mostly of standard federal loans and a minimal institutional grant. Instead of accepting this initial offer, Jessica executes a departmental infiltration strategy. She spends 3 hours analyzing the materials science department's faculty directory. She identifies the undergraduate program director and reads the abstracts of their 3 most recent published papers regarding sustainable polymers. Jessica does not send a generic email asking for scholarship money. That is the quickest way to be ignored. Instead, she sends a highly targeted communication to the undergraduate director requesting a brief, 15-minute virtual informational interview to discuss the department's 2026 research initiatives in sustainable polymers and how an incoming freshman might prepare to contribute to that specific lab. Imagine if you are that department chair. You spend your entire week dealing with administrative red tape and apathetic students. Suddenly, you receive a meticulously professional request from an incoming freshman who is actively interested in your specific life's work. You grant the interview. During that conversation, Jessica demonstrates her competence, asks intelligent questions about the curriculum, and establishes a genuine professional rapport. At the very end of the conversation, she casually mentions that while this program is her absolute first choice, she is currently analyzing the financial feasibility of attending based on her central aid package. She asks, purely as an informational question, if the department itself sponsors any internal merit awards or research stipends for incoming freshmen. She has just unlocked the hidden vault. Because she has already proven her value and aligned herself with the department's priorities, the chair is highly incentivized to advocate for her. The chair accesses the restricted alumni endowment and authorizes a supplemental $10,000 departmental scholarship, completely bypassing the central financial aid algorithm. To replicate Jessica's strategy, you must approach this process like a corporate headhunter targeting a specific division within a company. Your first step is to completely map the power structure of your intended major. You need to identify the department chair, the director of undergraduate studies, and any faculty members who serve on internal scholarship committees. You can usually find this information buried in the departmental faculty handbook or the staff directory on the specific college's subdomain. Once you have your targets, you must build an academic portfolio that proves you are a high-yield investment. This is not your standard college admissions essay about overcoming a personal challenge. This is a forward-looking document. It should detail any independent projects you have completed, relevant advanced coursework, technical certifications you have acquired, and a clear, articulate statement of how you intend to utilize the department's specific resources. Historical trends indicate that many departments are actually desperate to give this money away to qualified candidates. If an endowed fund generates $50,000 in yield for the 2026 academic year, and the department fails to disburse that money, they face severe institutional scrutiny. In many cases, unspent restricted funds can lead to a reduction in future allocations from the central university budget, as the central administration will argue the department clearly does not need additional resources. The faculty committee is under immense pressure to deploy that capital. They are simply waiting for a student who makes it easy for them to justify the expenditure. By presenting yourself as a highly motivated, research-oriented applicant, you solve their administrative problem. You transition from being a financial burden on the university to becoming a strategic asset for that specific department. This strategy is particularly effective in emerging academic fields or legacy departments experiencing historical underenrollment. In 2026, departments focusing on supply chain logistics, cybersecurity ethics, and specialized agricultural technologies are receiving massive influxes of corporate and alumni donations to address critical workforce shortages. Conversely, traditional humanities departments often possess massive, centuries-old endowments but are experiencing declining enrollment numbers. In both scenarios, the ratio of available capital to proactive applicants is incredibly favorable for the student. If you are applying as a classics major or an electrical engineering major, the strategy remains mathematically identical. You identify the restricted capital, you identify the gatekeeper of that capital, and you present a tailored value proposition that aligns perfectly with their internal departmental goals. You must initiate this contact early. The ideal window for departmental outreach is late fall or early winter of your senior year, directly concurrent with your standard admissions applications. Do not wait until you receive your general acceptance letter in the spring, as the departmental funds are often quietly committed to proactive students long before the Central Admissions Office releases its final decisions. By the time the general student body arrives on campus for orientation, the restricted endowments have already been drained. You must operate on an accelerated timeline, establishing these faculty relationships while your peers are still agonizing over their generic common application essays. Now you have constructed a multi-tiered financial fortress. You have secured your hyperlocal community micro-scholarships and legally insulated them from institutional displacement. You have successfully navigated the central financial aid algorithm to maximize your baseline grants. And you have infiltrated the academic departments to extract restricted alumni endowments. You have gathered an impressive arsenal of capital from a single institution. But the true mastery of college financing in 2026 does not end with accepting the best single offer. The most sophisticated families understand that an initial award letter is merely the opening bid in a high-stakes negotiation. You have to take this accumulated capital and weaponize it against competing universities. You have to understand the precise psychological triggers and legal mechanisms required to spark a bidding war between rival institutions, forcing them to drain their own discretionary funds just to keep you away from their competitors. The exact email templates, the strategic timing of your appeals, and the art of the leverage play are exactly what we are going to dissect next. The moment you receive an award letter from your top choice university, the natural human inclination is to celebrate, sign the dotted line, and buy the college sweatshirt. This is precisely the psychological vulnerability that higher education enrollment managers rely upon to maintain their institutional profit margins. In the high-stakes ecosystem of the 2026 admissions cycle, accepting a preliminary financial aid offer without initiating a formal secondary review is a fundamental abdication of your financial power. You must view that initial letter not as a final decree, but as the opening bid in a highly structured, data-driven negotiation. To effectively spark a bidding war between competing institutions, you must first understand the core metric that keeps university presidents and enrollment directors awake at night. This metric is known as the yield rate. The yield rate is the mathematical percentage of admitted students who actually choose to enroll. If a university admits 1,000 students and only 200 accept the offer, their yield rate is a disastrous 20%. Why does this matter to you? Because in the current year, a university's yield rate directly impacts their national rankings, their institutional prestige, and most importantly, their bond credit rating on Wall Street. A dropping yield rate signals declining market demand, which makes it more expensive for the university to borrow money for new dormitories or athletic stadiums. By late March and early April of your senior year, admissions offices transition from a posture of selection to a state of absolute panic. They are terrified of losing their coveted admitted class to rival institutions. This period of institutional anxiety is your window of maximum leverage. However, you cannot arbitrarily pit any two universities against each other and expect a financial concession. Universities operate within highly defined competitive tiers. They track a phenomenon known as cross-admit data. A prestigious private university in Massachusetts knows exactly which other prestigious private universities in New York or Pennsylvania regularly steal their accepted students. They do not care if you received a massive financial incentive from a local community college or an unranked regional state school. To trigger a successful leverage play, you must present a competing offer from a peer institution, a school that occupies the same competitive weight class or sits slightly higher in the regional hierarchy. Let us explore a highly specific case study to illustrate the mechanics of this strategy. Imagine if a student named Olivia from Chicago, Illinois, receives acceptance letters from two comparable mid-sized private universities in the Midwest. University A is Olivia's absolute dream school, but their financial aid package leaves her with an unmanageable $25,000 annual gap. University B is her secondary option, but they have offered her a massive presidential merit scholarship that covers nearly her entire cost of attendance. Olivia does not simply call University A and demand more money. Instead, she executes a meticulously structured professional appeal. The timeline of this appeal is critical. Olivia waits until the first week of April. She drafts a formal communication directed not to the general financial aid email address, which is often managed by student workers or automated systems, but directly to her assigned regional admissions counselor and the director of financial aid. The anatomy of her email is designed to trigger the specific psychological levers of the enrollment team. She begins with a statement of unequivocal affinity. She clearly articulates that University A is her absolute first choice, detailing specific academic programs, faculty research, and campus cultural elements that solidify her commitment. She must convince them that if the financial obstacle is removed, her enrollment is virtually a predetermined outcome. This is the crucial concept of yield protection. She is telling the enrollment director that an investment of additional institutional funds in her will result in a highly probable boost to their yield rate. Following this statement of affinity, Olivia executes the pivot. She introduces the competing offer with clinical, objective language. She states that while she intensely desires to attend University A, she has received a substantially more competitive financial package from University B, explicitly naming the peer institution. She does not use emotional language. She does not complain about the unfairness of the cost or the state of the economy. She frames the situation strictly as a mathematical dilemma, facing her family's long-term financial planning. She then attaches the official, unedited award letter from University B directly to the email. This step is absolutely non-negotiable. Financial aid committees operate entirely on documented evidence and verifiable data. You cannot bluff your way into a larger institutional scholarship. You must provide the exact documentation proving that a peer institution has assigned a higher financial valuation to your specific academic profile. The final section of Olivia's communication is the soft ultimatum. She respectfully requests a secondary review of her financial aid package, specifically asking if University A can match or significantly close the gap with the offer from University B to make her attendance financially viable. She concludes by stating a precise deadline, usually 3 to 5 days before the national decision deadline, indicating when she and her family must make their final, binding enrollment deposit and sign the institutional contracts. When this email lands on the desk of the regional admissions counselor, it initiates a hidden internal bureaucratic process. The counselor, who is often evaluated based on the number of students they successfully recruit from their designated geographic territory, suddenly becomes Olivia's internal corporate advocate. They take her file, complete with the competing offer, directly to the Financial Aid Appeals Committee. The committee analyzes the cross-admit threat. They verify that University B is indeed a recognized historical competitor. They look at their current institutional discount rate and their remaining discretionary funds for the 2026 academic cycle. Historical trends demonstrate that if a university is pacing behind its enrollment targets for the incoming freshman class, they will rapidly deploy localized, discretionary grants to secure high-value students who are heavily weighing a competitor's offer. In Olivia's scenario, University A authorizes an additional $15,000 annual grant, permanently altering her financial trajectory for the next 4 years without her ever having to increase her federal student loan burden. You must systematically replicate this exact protocol. If you have applied to 6 universities, you must analyze all 6 award letters side by side in a comprehensive spreadsheet. Identify your highest monetary offer and your highest preferred destination. If they are not the exact same institution, you now have the required ammunition to bridge the financial gap. You are essentially taking the financial valuation established by one institution and strategically imposing it upon another. It is vital to internalize that you are not asking for a charitable favor. You are presenting a rational market adjustment. You are demonstrating that your academic and extracurricular profile commands a specific price point in the highly competitive higher education marketplace. This strategic negotiation process requires emotional detachment, relentless follow-up, and absolute professionalism. You must track your communications meticulously, noting the exact dates of submission, the names and titles of the specific financial aid officers you contacted, and the dates of their expected internal reviews. If a university responds by flatly refusing to adjust their institutional grant money, you immediately counter by asking them to adjust the composition of the aid package itself. If they will not give you more free money, you demand that they reduce the mandated work-study requirement, allowing you to seek higher-paying off-campus employment, or you request that they convert your unsubsidized federal loans into institutional subsidized loans, thereby halting the immediate accrual of interest. You fight for every single percentile of financial advantage until the absolute final hour of the enrollment deadline. However, even the most aggressively negotiated financial aid packages can sometimes fall drastically short of covering the total comprehensive cost of attendance, leaving families facing the terrifying prospect of high-interest secondary private loans. When the institutional well runs completely dry, the appeals are denied, and the local community foundations have been entirely exhausted, you must look toward the largest, most underutilized pools of capital in the modern American economy. You must pivot away from the educational sector entirely and infiltrate the corporate sector. Massive multinational corporations and regional employers are currently deploying hundreds of millions of dollars in educational funding, completely outside the traditional university framework. The mechanisms to access these corporate tuition reimbursement programs, the specific legal structures of employer-sponsored degrees, and the exact strategy to get a Fortune 500 company to systematically underwrite your entire bachelor's degree before you even graduate are the critical next steps you must master. The historical trends of the past decade have culminated in a massive structural shift in how higher education is funded in the United States. We have officially entered the era of the corporate-sponsored degree. To understand why multinational conglomerates are suddenly acting like massive philanthropic scholarship foundations, you must look at their corporate tax liabilities and their catastrophic employee turnover rates. This is not corporate benevolence. This is a highly calculated, data-driven talent acquisition strategy. Retailers, logistics companies, and food service giants are hemorrhaging billions of dollars annually simply trying to recruit, train, and retain hourly workers. They have realized that offering a slight bump in the hourly wage does absolutely nothing to stop an employee from leaving for a competitor across the street. However, if they anchor that employee to a 4-year bachelor degree program paid entirely by the company, they mathematically secure that worker's loyalty for the duration of their academic career. You must understand the exact federal tax code that makes this entire ecosystem possible. Under Internal Revenue Service Section 127, any employer in the United States can provide an employee with up to $5,250 per calendar year in educational assistance, completely tax-free. This means the money does not count toward your gross taxable income, and the corporation gets a massive write-off. For decades, this $5,000 cap was the ceiling of corporate generosity, and it was distributed through a highly inefficient mechanism known as tuition reimbursement. In the legacy reimbursement model, you were still required to take out student loans or empty your savings account to pay the university up front. Then, after you completed the semester and proved you maintained a high grade point average, the corporate human resources department would slowly process a reimbursement check. This outdated model still exists, and it is a cash flow trap that you must avoid at all costs. In the current landscape of 2026, the strategic play is to completely ignore traditional reimbursement and target employers offering the direct payment, debt-free degree model. In this modern framework, the corporation essentially forms a closed-loop financial partnership directly with the university system, often utilizing a massive educational middleman network like Guild Education. Because the corporation is buying education at wholesale volume, the university heavily discounts the tuition. The corporation then pays the university directly up front before you ever step foot in a classroom or log into an online portal. You never see the bill, you never take out a bridge loan, and your out-of-pocket cost is literally $0. Let us examine a practical case study to demonstrate the staggering potential outcomes of this strategy. Consider a student named Michael, a 19-year-old living in suburban Texas in 2026. Michael wants to study supply chain logistics, but his family has zero capacity to contribute to the $60,000 total cost of a traditional degree. Instead of taking on predatory debt, Michael executes a corporate acquisition strategy. He applies for a standard, part-time hourly position at a local Target retail distribution center. He is not planning to make retail logistics his permanent career. He is utilizing the corporation as an educational venture capitalist. Michael begins working his required 20 hours per week. He meticulously tracks his employment timeline because he knows the exact activation date of the corporate educational benefits. Under Target's current dream to be program, Eligibility triggers almost immediately for both part-time and full-time team members. On day one of his eligibility, Michael logs into the corporate benefits portal and navigates away from the standard health insurance and retirement tabs, heading straight for the tuition assistance network. He is presented with a curated catalog of over 250 fully funded programs. Michael selects a Bachelor of Science in Supply Chain Management from a highly respected, regionally accredited partner university. He submits his application through the internal corporate portal. The corporation instantly verifies his employment status and approves the funding block. When the semester begins, the university sends the invoice directly to the corporation's accounting department. Michael works his 20 hours a week, earns his standard hourly wage to cover his living expenses, and systematically completes his coursework at night. 4 years later, Michael graduates with a highly marketable technical degree, 0 student loan debt, and 4 years of continuous corporate work experience on his resume. To execute Michael's strategy, you must perform a granular comparative analysis of the leading corporate programs available in 2026, as they are not created equal. The Starbucks College Achievement Plan remains the most historically aggressive option for students seeking a traditional 4-year university experience. If you average 20 hours a week as a barista, Starbucks will cover 100% of your upfront tuition for a first-time bachelor degree, exclusively through Arizona State University Online. They offer over 150 different majors, and crucially, they do not enforce a post-graduation retention clause. The day your degree is conferred, you can legally walk away from the espresso machine and leverage your new credential in the open market without owing the company a single cent. If you require more institutional variety, the Walmart Live Better You program is a formidable alternative. While they previously charged a nominal fee, the current iteration covers 100% of tuition and required textbooks across a multitude of partner universities. However, Walmart restricts their funding strictly to specific degree paths that align with their long-term corporate interests, such as business administration, supply chain, cybersecurity, and healthcare management. You cannot use Walmart's money to fund a degree in creative writing or art history. You are trading academic freedom for absolute financial security. For students interested in rapid technical credentialing or transitioning directly into the technology sector, the Amazon Career Choice Program offers a distinctly different architecture. Amazon focuses heavily on prepaying tuition for high-demand certificates, commercial driving licenses, and localized technical training, alongside their traditional bachelor degree options. Their primary objective is upskilling frontline warehouse workers into internal corporate roles or specific high-demand local industries. Before you sign an employment contract to access these funds, you must conduct intensive due diligence on the hidden strings attached. While progressive programs like Starbucks do not penalize you for leaving, many other corporate initiatives include aggressive clawback provisions. A clawback provision is a legally binding clause buried in the educational assistance contract stipulating that if you resign from the company or are terminated for cause within a specific window, typically 1 to 2 years after your final class is paid for, you are legally obligated to repay the corporation for the exact cost of the tuition they funded. You must read the fine print of the Human Resources Manual to determine if your targeted corporation treats their educational funding as a gift or as a conditional loan. You must also strategically manage your course load against your work schedule. The most common point of failure in the corporate-sponsored degree model is sheer academic and physical burnout. Working a physically demanding logistics or retail job, while carrying a full-time, rigorous academic course load requires absolute operational discipline. You must learn how to manipulate your corporate scheduling portal to optimize your academic productivity. You must understand the internal corporate hierarchy to negotiate favorable shifts with your direct manager, framing your educational pursuit not as a distraction from your hourly duties, but as a long-term development of your professional competence that ultimately benefits the store's performance metrics. While the corporate-sponsored degree is the ultimate shield against student loan debt, it requires a massive commitment of time and physical labor. But what if you could access significant, specialized capital without having to load boxes or pour coffee? What if your specific demographic background, your unique medical history, or your deeply obscure personal hobbies were actually worth tens of thousands of dollars in the private philanthropic market? There is an entirely separate, highly lucrative ecosystem of hyper-niche private foundations that do not care about your grade point average, your athletic ability, or your corporate allegiance. They only care about your specific, unalterable personal attributes. Identifying these obscure trusts, legally qualifying for their deeply specific mandates, and stacking these unusual microgrants into a massive, decentralized funding portfolio is the exact strategy we are going to master next. When you shift your attention away from massive corporate conglomerates and massive federal aid packages, you enter the strangest, most highly fragmented, and arguably most mathematically advantageous sector of the higher education funding ecosystem. This is the realm of the hyper-niche private foundation. To understand why this money exists, you must understand the psychology of legacy philanthropy. Every year, wealthy individuals pass away and leave specific instructions in their estate plans to establish memorial trusts. These donors do not want their wealth absorbed by a generic university general fund. They want to immortalize their specific personal passions, their unique physical traits, or their deeply obscure hobbies. Because these trusts are legally bound by the incredibly restrictive mandates written into their founding documents, the money cannot be generalized. If a trust is legally established to fund the education of a student who is exceptionally tall, the board of directors cannot simply give that money to a student of average height, no matter how high their grade point average might be. This legal rigidity creates a market inefficiency that you can exploit. Because the eligibility requirements are so bizarre and so incredibly narrow, the national applicant pools for these microgrants frequently drop into the single digits. Historical trends reveal that millions of dollars in these obscure trusts simply roll over year after year, because literally not a single qualified student bothered to submit an application. You are no longer competing against 500,000 high school valedictorians. You are competing against the 3 other people in the United States who share your highly specific characteristic. Let us examine a practical case study concerning physical attributes and manageable medical conditions. Imagine if a student named Ethan, residing in Ohio in the current year of 2026, is approaching his senior year of high school. Ethan is an average student academically, but he possesses 2 distinct unalterable traits. First, he stands 6 feet 2 inches tall. Second, he was diagnosed with a mild, easily manageable case of asthma as a child. Most students would view these traits as entirely irrelevant to college financing. Ethan, executing a sophisticated audit of his personal attributes, recognizes them as monetizable assets. Through diligent research in specialized foundation registries, Ethan discovers Tall Clubs International. This is an actual, historically established organization that offers a guaranteed minimum scholarship pool specifically designated for women who are at least 5 feet 10 inches tall and men who are at least 6 feet 2 inches tall. The application requires no extraordinary essay about saving the world. It simply requires a medical verification of his physical height. Ethan secures a standard letter from his primary care physician, submits the application, and taps into an applicant pool that eliminates 90% of the general population immediately. Next, Ethan leverages his medical history. He identifies the specific regional chapters of national asthma and allergy foundations that operate privately funded trusts for graduating seniors. He documents his medical history, writes a highly focused essay on managing respiratory health while maintaining an active lifestyle, and submits his portfolio. He is not claiming a severe disability. He is simply meeting the precise biological parameter dictated by the legal charter of the trust. Through these 2 highly specific avenues, Ethan secures $3,000 in unrestricted private capital. Now, consider the application of this strategy to obscure hobbies and unconventional interests. The modern high school experience heavily prioritizes mainstream extracurricular activities like varsity athletics or student government. However, private philanthropic capital flows heavily toward preserving dying arts, niche agricultural practices, and highly technical analog skills. Imagine if a student named Chloe from rural Arkansas spends her weekends not playing soccer, but engaging in the highly specialized hobby of competitive duck calling or amateur ham radio operation. Chloe bypasses the massive national scholarship search engines entirely. Instead, she targets the specific governing bodies of her niche interests. She identifies the Historical Chick and Sophie Major Memorial Duck Calling Contest, a legitimately funded private trust that awards substantial cash scholarships to high school seniors who can demonstrate elite proficiency in their highly specific auditory craft. She does not need a perfect standardized test score. She needs an audio recording demonstrating a flawless feeding chuckle and a hailing call. She then pivots to her secondary interest. She accesses the American Radio Relay League Foundation, an organization that manages dozens of highly specific endowed funds exclusively for young amateur radio operators holding an active Federal Communications Commission license. By submitting a copy of her technical license and a brief statement regarding her analog communication projects, she accesses a multi-million-dollar endowment completely insulated from the general student population. The architecture of this approach relies entirely on the strategy of decentralized stacking. You are actively seeking out grants of $500, $1,000, or $2,000. Amateurs dismiss these amounts as practically irrelevant when facing a $70,000 annual tuition bill. Sophisticated strategists understand that 5 independent $2,000 microgrants mathematically equate to a $10,000 major scholarship, but with infinitely less competition and zero reliance on a single institutional decision. You are building a diversified portfolio of private capital that travels with you, regardless of which university you ultimately choose to attend in the fall of 2026. To execute this systematic audit of your own life, you must document every single facet of your existence. You must catalog your exact ethnic heritage down to the specific county of your ancestors. You must list every organization your parents and grandparents have ever belonged to, including labor unions, fraternal orders, and obscure trade associations, as many of these groups maintain legacy trusts for descendants. You must analyze your dietary choices, as specialized trusts exist exclusively for lifelong vegetarians or students with celiac disease. You must review your creative hobbies, noting that organizations like the company producing Duck Brand Duct Tape historically award massive $10,000 primary prizes simply for manufacturing a prom dress out of their adhesive product. You are breaking your identity down into highly specific demographic and behavioral data points, and then matching those exact points to the legal mandates of private trusts. You must abandon the basic search engine mentality. You will not find these trusts by typing generic phrases into a search bar. You must learn to utilize advanced Boolean search operators, combining your highly specific traits with legal terminology like memorial trust, endowed fund, or philanthropic charter. You must search the digital archives of community foundations in your specific geographic radius, and you must read the historical press releases of specialized trade magazines that cover your particular hobbies. You are conducting professional-level grant prospecting. However, accumulating this massive decentralized portfolio of microgrants introduces a completely new, potentially devastating threat. When you successfully stack $10,000 in private philanthropic checks, you are suddenly holding a significant amount of liquid capital. If you endorse those checks and deposit them directly into your personal checking account, or if you use them to purchase a vehicle for commuting instead of required textbooks, you are triggering an immediate and catastrophic audit from the Internal Revenue Service. The federal government has incredibly strict, highly punitive regulations regarding how scholarship money is legally classified and taxed in the year 2026. If you mismanage the deployment of these funds, that $10,000 will suddenly be classified as unearned taxable income, resulting in massive financial penalties that completely wipe out your hard-earned gains. You must understand the precise legal definitions of qualified versus unqualified educational expenses. You must know exactly how to shield your microgrants from federal taxation, and you must master the specific accounting maneuvers required to keep the Internal Revenue Service out of your college funding portfolio. The exact legal tax shields and expenditure strategies are exactly what we must analyze right now. The Internal Revenue Service does not view your decentralized portfolio of microgrants as a charitable reward for your hard work. They view it as a potential, highly regulated stream of taxable income. The moment you cross the threshold from being a high school student to becoming a heavily funded university scholar in the year 2026, you simultaneously become a manager of complex financial assets. The federal government operates under Title 26 of the United States Code, specifically Section 117, which legally dictates the exact boundary between a tax-free educational grant and a taxable financial windfall. This is the invisible tripwire that catches thousands of ambitious students every single year. You can execute every single strategy we have discussed perfectly, secure $50,000 in private community funding, and still end up owing the federal government a massive unexpected tax bill by April of your freshman year if you do not understand the legal principle of capital segregation. The entire federal tax framework for scholarships rests upon a rigid classification system, dividing your college costs into two categories: qualified education expenses and unqualified education expenses. The Internal Revenue Service definition of a qualified expense is incredibly narrow. It strictly includes your core tuition, mandatory enrollment fees, and any books, supplies, or equipment that are explicitly required for your specific coursework. That is the entire list. If an expense does not fall into those specific parameters, It is legally classified as unqualified. Unqualified expenses encompass everything else required to keep you alive and functioning while attending university. This includes your dormitory housing, your off-campus apartment rent, your university meal plan, your student health insurance premiums, your parking passes, and your travel expenses to and from campus. Let us examine a highly detailed case study to illustrate the severe financial consequences of mismanaging these classifications. Imagine if a student named Jackson, residing in Phoenix, Arizona, arrives on his university campus in the fall of 2026. Jackson is a master of the local scholarship strategy. He successfully accumulated $30,000 in private foundation checks. His actual university tuition and mandatory fees for the year cost $20,000. Jackson takes the remaining $10,000 of his scholarship money and uses it to pay for his on-campus dormitory and his unlimited dining hall meal plan. He believes he has achieved absolute financial victory, attending college completely free of charge. However, historical trends in tax enforcement reveal a devastating impending reality for Jackson. Come tax season in the spring of 2027, Jackson is legally required to report that $10,000 as unearned taxable income because it was spent on unqualified expenses. Due to complex federal tax regulations surrounding full-time students, this unearned income could be subject to his parents' marginal tax rate, a mechanism historically known as the kiddie tax. Jackson could suddenly receive a tax liability of $2,000 or more, money he no longer possesses because he literally consumed it in the campus dining hall. To protect your funding portfolio, you must implement a rigorous strategy of capital segregation. You must explicitly control exactly which pool of money pays for which specific category of expenses. You never simply endorse a private foundation check and deposit it into your personal checking account. Furthermore, you do not simply hand a stack of checks to the university bursar without written directives. When you submit outside scholarship funds to your university, you must attach a formal, documented letter instructing the Financial Aid Accounting Office to apply those specific funds exclusively toward tuition and mandatory fees. By forcing the university to allocate your private grants strictly to your qualified expenses, you establish an ironclad legal tax shield. This requires you to find alternative funding mechanisms for your unqualified expenses, such as room and board. This is where sophisticated educational planners utilize the strategic synergy of the 529 College Savings Plan. If your family has historically contributed to a 529 plan, those specific funds operate under an entirely different set of federal tax rules. Unlike scholarship money, 529 funds can be legally utilized to pay for room and board, meal plans, and off-campus rent up to the university's official cost of attendance allowance, completely tax-free. Therefore, the master strategy in 2026 is to use every single dollar of your scholarship portfolio to aggressively eliminate the tuition bill, while simultaneously deploying your 529 funds or even federally subsidized student loans to cover your housing and food. By keeping these capital streams entirely segregated, you maximize your tax efficiency and protect your net worth. However, executing this strategy requires you to understand the specific documentation the Internal Revenue Service uses to monitor your financial activity. Every January, your university is federally mandated to generate a document known as a Form 1098-T. This form is a comprehensive financial summary of your academic year, and a copy is sent directly to both you and the federal government. You must understand the mechanics of Box 1 and Box 5 on this specific form. Box 1 reports the total amount of payments received for qualified tuition and related expenses. Box 5 reports the total amount of scholarships and grants administered and processed by the university. The federal taxation algorithm is incredibly straightforward. If the number in Box 5 is significantly larger than the number in Box 1, the automated systems flag your account for potential taxation, assuming you used the excess scholarship money for unqualified living expenses. When this mathematical mismatch occurs, it frequently triggers an automated federal audit notice known as a CP 2000. This is a computer-generated letter stating that the income reported on your tax return does not match the information provided by the university, and it will demand immediate payment of back taxes. This is the exact moment where your personal record-keeping becomes your ultimate defense. Box 1 on the Form 1098-T only captures what the university directly billed you. It does not capture the hundreds or thousands of dollars you spent out of pocket at third-party retailers for required textbooks, specialized laboratory safety gear, or mandatory nursing scrubs. These out-of-pocket purchases are legally qualified expenses, but they are invisible to the university's automated reporting system. To combat an automated audit and legally offset your excess scholarship income, you must practice meticulous forensic accounting. Every single time you purchase a required item for a class in 2026, you must retain the itemized physical or digital receipt. More importantly, you must permanently save a copy of the specific course syllabus that explicitly states the item was a mandatory requirement for enrollment. You cannot simply buy a high-end laptop and claim it was an educational expense. You must possess the engineering syllabus that explicitly requires that specific computational processing power. When the automated tax notice arrives, you simply provide this highly organized ledger of receipts and syllabi to your certified public accountant. By legally documenting these invisible qualified expenses, you manually bridge the gap between Box 1 and Box 5, neutralizing the audit and protecting your capital. But what happens when you execute every single one of these strategies with absolute perfection, and you actually acquire more scholarship money than your total comprehensive cost of attendance? What occurs when your tuition is zero, your housing is fully funded, your textbooks are paid for, and you are still holding $15,000 in uncashed private foundation checks? The standard amateur advice is to simply write a polite letter to the community foundations, thanking them for their generosity and returning the funds. This is a massive generational strategic failure. There is an entirely legal, highly complex framework for hoarding excess undergraduate scholarship capital and strategically rolling it over to fund your future graduate degree, law school tuition, or medical school residency, effectively ensuring your entire multi-tiered higher educational journey is completely subsidized. The precise legal deferment contracts, the graduate school loophole, and the trust-holding strategies required to move this money across academic timelines are exactly what we are going to dissect next. The scenario where you secure more funding than your university can legally process is known in financial aid circles as an over-award. When your total scholarship portfolio exceeds your federally determined cost of attendance, the University Compliance Office will literally halt the processing of incoming checks. At this exact junction, 99% of students commit a critical strategic error. They politely contact the local philanthropic organizations, the regional Rotary clubs, and the private family trusts, express their profound gratitude, and instruct those organizations to keep the money or award it to the runner-up. You must never voluntarily surrender secured capital. Historical trends indicate that acquiring capital is exponentially more difficult than retaining it, and returning these funds fundamentally ignores a massive, perfectly legal structural loophole designed to finance advanced degrees. We are talking about the interdegree capital transfer, a strategy that allows you to hoard your excess undergraduate wealth and strategically deploy it when you transition into law school, medical school, or a Master of Business Administration program. To execute this transfer, you must understand the fundamental difference between institutional grants and private foundation capital. If a university gives you a presidential merit scholarship and you graduate a semester early, you do not get to cash out the remaining balance. Institutional money is highly conditional and operates on a strict use it or lose it framework. However, private community scholarships, microgrants, and corporate educational stipends are entirely different financial instruments. These funds are managed by independent boards of directors whose primary legal mandate is simply to facilitate higher education. Their charters rarely specify that the education must strictly culminate in a bachelor degree. They are investing in your ultimate professional outcome. If you can logically demonstrate that an advanced graduate degree is the necessary next step to achieve the professional outcome they originally funded you for, you can negotiate a formal hold on the disbursement of those funds. Let us look at a highly specific case study to demonstrate the mechanics of this deferment. Imagine if a student named Sarah, residing in Austin, Texas in the year 2026, is entering her senior year of undergraduate studies. She is a pre-medical student who aggressively executed the geographic containment strategy during her high school senior year, securing $30,000 in local community foundation grants. Because Sarah also secured a massive corporate sponsorship that covered her core tuition, she arrives at her undergraduate graduation with $15,000 of uncashed, unused private foundation checks sitting in her university bursar account. The university is preparing to issue a refund check directly to Sarah, which, as we established in our previous analysis, would trigger a catastrophic taxable event. Sarah does not accept the refund check, nor does she return the money to the foundations. Instead, she executes a proactive trust-holding strategy. 3 months before her undergraduate graduation, Sarah formally contacts the board of directors of the 3 specific local foundations that awarded her the excess $15,000. She does not send a generic email. She requests a brief, formal presentation at their next monthly board meeting. When Sarah addresses the local business leaders and philanthropists, she presents them with her official acceptance letter to a prestigious medical school in Texas. She clearly articulates her long-term goal of returning to that specific community to practice pediatric medicine, directly aligning her future career with the foundation's local philanthropic mission. She then presents the financial reality. She explains that while her undergraduate degree is fully funded, her incoming medical school cost of attendance is projected to exceed $90,000 per year. She explicitly asks the board to formally rescind the remaining portion of their original undergraduate disbursement and simultaneously reissue a new, legally binding award letter designating those exact same funds for her incoming medical school tuition. She is asking the foundation to act as a temporary escrow account. By instructing the foundation to hold the capital within their own tax-exempt treasury for a period of 6 to 12 months, Sarah legally entirely avoids taking personal, constructive receipt of the money. This concept of constructive receipt is the absolute cornerstone of the interdegree capital transfer. The Internal Revenue Service dictates that you are only taxed on income that you have the immediate, unrestricted ability to use. By legally restructuring the scholarship agreement so that the funds remain in the possession of the granting organization until you officially matriculate into your graduate program, you ensure that the money never touches your personal bank account or your undergraduate tax forms. The capital simply leaps over the taxable undergraduate environment and lands directly into the massive financial deficit of your graduate school cost of attendance, where it is instantly absorbed as a completely tax-free qualified educational expense. To facilitate this, you must draft a precise legal addendum to your original scholarship agreement. You cannot rely on a verbal handshake with a local charity president. You must provide the foundation with a single-page document, often called a Scholarship Deferment and Reallocation Agreement. This document must state your full legal name, the original award amount, the exact remaining balance to be held in trust, and a strict deadline for when the funds must be transferred to the graduate institution's bursar office. It must explicitly state that the funds are highly restricted and can only be used for qualified tuition and mandatory fees at the graduate level. Providing this paperwork does 2 things. First, it protects your capital with a legally binding paper trail. Second, it profoundly impresses the board of directors. You are demonstrating a level of financial sophistication and mature asset management that is virtually unheard of among 22-year-old college graduates. Potential outcomes of this level of professionalism often include the board members spontaneously deciding to increase the deferred award amount out of sheer respect for your strategic planning. This strategy is not limited to medical school or law school. Historical trends show this exact maneuver being successfully executed by students rolling excess capital into specialized coding boot camps, post-baccalaureate technical certifications, and even international master degree programs, provided the destination institution possesses a valid federal school code recognized by the United States Department of Education. If the institution can legally accept a federal student loan, it can legally process a deferred private foundation check. You are systematically converting your undergraduate surplus into an impenetrable financial shield against the most expensive, predatory debt trap in the entire American educational system, which is graduate school financing. You have now mastered the art of acquiring capital from the central administration, infiltrating academic departments for restricted endowments, manipulating the institutional discount rate, leveraging corporate funding, securing hyper-niche private grants, shielding that money from federal taxation, and rolling the excess into advanced degrees. You have constructed a comprehensive, impenetrable architecture for financing your education entirely with other people's money. However, there is one final, ultimate scenario that the most advanced financial strategists eventually encounter. What happens if you execute every single one of these steps perfectly? You secure massive amounts of capital, your undergraduate degree is fully funded, you have absolutely zero intention of ever attending graduate school, and you are still holding a massive surplus of private philanthropic funds. What if you want to take that excess educational capital and legally transition it into foundational wealth to start a small business, fund a real estate down payment, or permanently supercharge your retirement portfolio the exact moment you graduate? The highly controversial, mathematically aggressive tactics required to legally liquidate a scholarship portfolio and transform educational grants into unrestricted personal wealth are exactly what we must expose next. The fundamental friction point that prevents students from legally liquidating their excess educational capital is a profound misunderstanding of federal tax law. When you have perfectly executed every strategy we have discussed, you may find yourself holding private foundation checks, community microgrants, and corporate stipends that exceed your total cost of attendance. The immediate, instinctual fear is that keeping this money constitutes financial fraud or violates the terms of the granting organizations. This is a complete misconception rooted in financial illiteracy. Unless the specific legal charter of the private foundation explicitly mandates that unspent funds must be returned to their treasury, those funds belong to you. The organizations awarded you this capital because they believed in your ultimate professional and personal trajectory. They are investing in your future economic output. The federal government does not forbid you from keeping this excess capital. It simply demands a percentage of it. To legally transform an educational grant into unrestricted foundational wealth, you must willingly and strategically cross the threshold of taxation. This is the exact strategy executed by the most advanced financial planners in the United States. You must abandon the mindset that paying taxes on a scholarship is a failure. Paying taxes on a scholarship is the legally required toll you pay to convert restricted academic funds into completely clean, unrestricted liquid cash. According to the Internal Revenue Service under Section 117 of the Federal Tax Code, any scholarship or grant money utilized for unqualified living expenses or retained as excess cash is classified as unearned taxable income. To successfully liquidate your portfolio, you must meticulously document your excess funds and officially declare them on your annual tax return. Let us examine a highly specific case study to illustrate the mathematical reality of this capital conversion. Imagine if a student named Liam, graduating from a university in Florida in the year 2026, has secured a massive portfolio of unrestricted local and regional community scholarships. His total university bill was entirely neutralized by a massive corporate sponsorship program, leaving him with $30,000 in uncashed private foundation checks. Liam does not return these checks. He endorses them and deposits them directly into a high-yield savings account. He knows that he has just generated a massive taxable event. During the spring tax season following his graduation, Liam hires a certified public accountant. He provides his accountant with the exact documentation of his $30,000 in excess scholarship capital. The accountant files a standard Form 1040, explicitly declaring the entire $30,000 as taxable scholarship income. Because Liam is graduating and entering the workforce, this amount is subjected to his standard marginal tax rate. Let us assume, based on historical tax brackets, that his effective tax rate on this specific unearned income is 20%. Liam writes a legal check to the Internal Revenue Service for $6,000. Most amateurs would view losing $6,000 to the federal government as a tragedy. Sophisticated strategists view this as an absolute triumph. By willingly paying the $6,000 tax liability, Liam has legally severed the $30,000 from its educational restrictions. He has successfully laundered the capital through the federal tax system. He now possesses $24,000 of completely clean, unrestricted, post-tax personal wealth. He has zero student loan debt, a fully funded bachelor degree, and $24,000 in liquid cash to launch his adult life. If he had returned the money to the foundations out of a misplaced fear of the Internal Revenue Service, his net worth would be zero. By understanding the statutory framework of capital conversion, his net worth is $24,000. Once this capital has been legally converted into unrestricted post-tax cash, the strategy shifts entirely from educational financing to aggressive wealth generation. You are no longer navigating financial aid algorithms. You are navigating the broader American economy. Historical trends demonstrate that the most mathematically advantageous deployment of this clean capital is the immediate acquisition of appreciating assets. The first and most critical deployment strategy involves exploiting a massive structural shift in federal retirement law that reached peak maturity in 2026. This requires leveraging the Secure 2.0 Act. Imagine if Liam's parents had diligently saved $15,000 in a $529 college savings plan over the course of his childhood. Because Liam entirely funded his own education through our aggressive private scholarship strategies, that $15,000 was never used. Historically, withdrawing unused $529 funds for non-educational purposes would trigger massive federal penalties and income taxes. However, under the current federal legislation of 2026, Liam is permitted to execute a direct rollover of those unused 529 funds into a tax-advantaged Roth individual retirement account. The statutory requirements for this maneuver dictate that the 529 account must have been open for a minimum of 15 years, and the rollovers are subject to the annual standard Roth contribution limits until they hit a lifetime maximum of $35,000. Because Liam generated his own clean post-tax cash from his scholarship liquidation, he does not need to touch his parents' savings for his immediate living expenses. He legally transitions that stagnant 529 educational capital directly into a Roth IRA. Based on historical stock market trends and the mechanics of compound interest, funding a Roth IRA at age 22 provides a devastating mathematical advantage over peers who wait until their 30s to begin retirement planning. Liam has essentially forced his excess educational capital to permanently subsidize his retirement decades before he even begins his primary career. The second deployment strategy for your legally converted scholarship cash involves the acquisition of physical real estate through federal leverage programs. You now possess the liquid capital required to bypass the traditional decades-long saving period for a housing down payment. You can take your clean post-tax $24,000 and immediately target a multifamily property utilizing a Federal Housing Administration loan. The Federal Housing Administration allows first-time homebuyers to acquire residential properties with a highly subsidized down payment of only 3.5%. If Liam targets a standard duplex priced at $400,000, his required down payment is exactly $14,000. He deploys $14,000 of his liquidated scholarship capital to close on the property. He occupies one unit of the duplex to fulfill the primary residency requirement of the federal loan, and he immediately leases the second unit to a tenant. The tenant's monthly rental payments are strategically utilized to subsidize the overarching mortgage of the entire structure. Liam has essentially transitioned from living in a university dormitory to becoming a property investor within 6 months of graduation, entirely funded by the excess capital generated by his localized scholarship acquisition campaign. He used private community foundations to inadvertently buy his first piece of commercial real estate. Alternatively, if real estate does not align with your professional trajectory, this clean capital serves as the ultimate entrepreneurial seed fund. You can legally utilize your post-tax scholarship liquidation to incorporate a limited liability company, purchase commercial inventory, fund initial marketing campaigns, or acquire the specialized technical equipment required to launch a private consulting firm. You are entering the highly competitive modern workforce with a massive structural advantage. While your peers are desperately accepting suboptimal corporate positions simply to service their crippling monthly student loan payments, you are operating from a position of absolute financial leverage. You possess the liquid cash necessary to take calculated entrepreneurial risks, reject low-paying salary offers, and dictate the terms of your own professional employment. You have now completed the ultimate architectural blueprint for extracting wealth from the higher education system in 2026. You have learned to mathematically dismantle the central admissions bureaucracy, infiltrate specific academic departments, manipulate the institutional yield rate, legally harvest corporate tuition networks, dominate hyperlocal philanthropic registries, construct federal tax shields against the Internal Revenue Service, and legally liquidate your excess capital to fund your retirement and real estate portfolios. You have completely rewritten the financial narrative of your own life. The system is entirely mechanical, the capital is undeniably present, and the legal frameworks are entirely public record. The only remaining variable in this equation is your willingness to execute the protocol. However, as you step out of the educational sector and deploy your new wealth into the open market, you will immediately encounter an entirely new ecosystem of predatory corporate taxation, high-stakes consumer credit algorithms, and institutional banking traps designed to slowly drain your net worth. The exact strategies to legally bypass the consumer credit bureaus, structure your new assets behind impenetrable corporate veils, and completely automate your wealth generation against inflation are exactly what we must expose next.